Hello everyone, and thank you all for joining us today at SEA Dreamin. I'm Shibu Abraham, a Salesforce MVP and marketing champion, currently residing in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I lead the Salesforce APAC practice for UST, which is a global Salesforce Crest partner, and I'm also a Trailblazer community group leader. I do blog and post videos often on Salesforce topics for our community. And a little less known fact about me, I'm also quite passionate about Agile, and I've worked with Agile teams over the years. You can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I would be happy to connect. Okay, so now moving into our topic for today, we'll be focusing on the Salesforce Analyst role and why it is relevant for development teams today. Okay. Now, as soon as you hear the word analyst along with an Agile team, nowadays immediately we associate the role with a business analyst and expect that this person would be responsible for capturing requirements, writing user stories, and validating features that are delivered for each iteration, right? I've even found that sometimes analysts act as proxies for product owners for distributed teams, and they may not be available in the same location as the team, right? So in the context of Salesforce teams, a business analyst may have some experience with Salesforce, but is not expected to know in-depth features of the platform. The emphasis primarily would be on being able to converse with the business stakeholders and capture requirements, and they would in turn work with the technical team to identify feasibility of the features on the Salesforce platform. But the focus of today's session is on the Systems Analyst role, okay, which is more techno-functional one, having strong expertise on the Salesforce platform, especially in designing low-code solutions. Now, about 8 to 10 years back, when I worked with Salesforce teams, we used to have these roles known as Business Systems Analysts. Now, some of you may be familiar with the old-time artifacts like the BRD, SRS, and design docs. Okay. Now, SRS is Software Requirement Specification. BRD is Business Requirements Document, for those of you who have not heard about it. So the BSAs, as we fondly used to call them, they used to review the requirements from the BRDs and then convert them to functional specifications in the SRS and then create the high-level design. And as part of the design, they would specify how the requirement would be solutioned. Like, is it out of the box? Is it configuration changes, custom code, or a mix of these? So the BSAs used to be the functional experts of the Salesforce platform and well versed in how to solution using low-code features. They would even know, when the solution would warrant custom development. Developers were not allowed to simply introduce custom code into the platform without justifying and being able to convince the BSAs that that was the best option for the requirement. So let's fast forward to the current day development teams that we have. Most of the folks work in Agile feature teams, right? With Agile transformation, a lot of organizations changed up the roles and tried to map the olden day roles to the 3 Scrum roles. If they are following Scrum, they would have the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team. So the project managers, they became Scrum Masters. All the team members involved in implementation were mapped to the dev team, which primarily meant developers and testers. Now that left the BSAs and the BAs in the middle. Okay, and they were forced to either move into a developer role or a product owner role. And you can probably guess which way most of them went, right? Yes, majority of them took the product owner path and started focusing on the product backlogs and user stories and requirements, right? Even with the few that got augmented into the development team, either they moved into a full development role or became a proxy BA for the product owner. Now, what this meant was that most of the solution design now rested in the hands of the developers. Okay. And there was no longer a gatekeeper anymore who would vet the design for each of the requirements coming in and validating the pros and cons of which solution makes sense. Right? Stories were groomed, sized, and then pulled into each of the sprints. The developers would start taking in the stories one by one, and in many teams, it is left to the individual developers to identify the solution. Now, if they do get stuck, they would go to a senior in the team who would again be another technical member, right? So even if the teams had technical leads, they were mostly technical and would give guidance to the teams from that perspective. The system analyst perspective was actually now missing. The role that the BSAs used to actually do earlier, that was no longer available in the modern Agile teams, right? Now, architects also operated on the program or strategy level across multiple feature teams, right? So they would provide high-level architecture framework and design, but they will not be able to check each and every story coming into a single team, right? And then verify if the appropriate solution is chosen. So what we earlier used to have within a particular team, we used to have that single person who used to vet the design for every requirement that came in. That actually went missing. Now it was actually given across, the ownership was now transferred back to each of the developers right now. So it's up to them to figure out, okay, what is the right design. The peer reviews may happen from time to time, but we cannot guarantee that that the best solution is being actually addressed for every requirement that comes in. Okay. Now, gradually, organizations started moving in the direction of only hiring in folks who were skilled in Salesforce development. Like, no one wanted anyone with pure functional experience anymore. And the reasoning was that, well, a developer can do both low code and custom code, whereas a low code functional person cannot do custom code. So why not spend the money on hiring someone who can do both, right? Now, well, if you have hired or like if you have worked with developers long enough, you will know that they love solving problems through code. And when you give them a problem, they will immediately use the strong points, which is custom development, right? So I've hardly found developers who would sit and analyze each story, jot down different design options, including all possible low-code options before even considering custom code. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all developers do it this way or that this is bad, right? The message is that we should leave developers to do what they do best, and that is programming or like custom development, right? When you do have the option to get really good functional experts who love to analyze and work out low-code options, why not leverage them for your team, right? And our market trends haven't helped either. With the increase in demand for Salesforce developers, more and more people are learning how to do custom development and then moving into the Salesforce ecosystem, simply because you get a higher pay for being a developer. On the other hand, a person who is really good in functional areas and low code is struggling to find opportunities. So this has indirectly caused folks in the community to focus less on low code features in the Salesforce platform and instead learn more and focus on Apex, Visual Force, and Lightning, right? So even in interviews, you would hardly get a nod if you say you were very proficient in low code but very less exposure to custom code, right? Now, the advantage of putting in a functional expert in the team is that he or she will find different ways of solving a requirement through low code options, right? And not knowing the custom code development should actually be taken as an advantage here, since they will not be biased to use custom code. And in my experience, I've seen a lot of good talent who are really good in analyzing and providing functional solutions, but not very savvy in programming, right? So imagine the power your team would hold if you could actually bring the rest of the best of both the worlds for your projects. Okay. So now let's look at some of the responsibilities of the Salesforce Systems Analyst. The Systems Analyst would still be part of the development team, and they will work on stories with the technical team, right? The developers. So if they do have bandwidth, they would also help with stories that can be implemented using low-code solutions. Okay, and they can also help with the backlog refinement and grooming. And they will be able to help analyze new requirements, feasibility analysis, and even assisting with spikes. Now, the Systems Analysts are the primary folks who will be actually helping with the high-level solution design for each of the user stories in a sprint, and they will work closely with the development team on appropriate implementation approaches. Okay, they will also be able to help with validation of user stories in each of the sprints. And finally, the Systems Analyst can also work with technical leads and architects in identifying areas for refactoring and addressing technical debt over time, especially with newer features being introduced in every Salesforce release. Now the question arises, what would a system analyst be doing something different which an existing developer or BA does it? Well, you can definitely have existing developers or business analysts performing some of these tasks. And if they have the skill set and passion to do this, by all means do so. But if they do not, then it is always wise to not to overload them and then invest in a proper systems analyst for the team. Okay. So now that we have seen how the systems analyst role can be beneficial for your team, let's explore how we can actually fit this into your agile team. So the simplest model where you will look at having them in your team would be to have one or two systems analysts working along with the Salesforce developers and QAs in your team. Now the number can vary depending on the size of your feature team and the complexity level of requirements coming in. If the requirements are relatively simple, having just one analyst should be sufficient. But if it's a large and complex implementation, especially with multiple interlocks, then it may be good to invest in more than one analyst. But note that you must have at least one analyst per feature team working on Salesforce implementation stories. Now, if your team likes XP practices, extreme programming, then it would be good to use pair programming and have one system analyst with one dev. Now, this may seem like an overkill to have two folks work on a story at the same time, but from experience, it has been shown that teams using pair programming effectively has yielded better results than having work on it individually. Right? The developer can also learn low-code best practices from the analyst, and the analyst in turn can learn potential options of when to use custom code from the developer. They can work together in optimizing the right design for their stories and move faster towards completion of their tasks. Okay, so sometimes there could be both low code and custom code tasks for a story. They can then divide the work and then verify the results together once their respective tasks are complete. Now, the developer can also help with unit testing and test classes, while the analyst can do manual or exploratory testing, to ensure the user stories work well from a user perspective. Okay. Now you can take this one step further and even form smaller pods within your team, comprising of the systems analyst, the dev, and a QA, each of them working on a story together. These are just a few sample models. You could have your own custom approach to add the systems analyst in your team, and there is no right or wrong in choosing an option, and it varies from organization to organization. So, end of the day, you should just choose an approach that your team shall be comfortable working with and be able to get the most value out of it. Okay. Now, in terms of what we would look for in a systems analyst, right? The person should have good analytical and problem-solving skills. Okay, the analyst should focus on outcome-based solutions rather than just following a process. So we call it outcome-oriented thinking, right? So many developers are tuned to thinking from a system perspective, and it helps to have someone in the team thinking from a user perspective. The analyst should be actually proficient in Salesforce low-code features across the platform, okay, including configuration and process automation as well. And then the analyst should also know what can be solutioned using low code and what cannot. Okay, and when to take the help of custom code development, or use third-party tools or app exchange applications, etc. Right? A good analyst should keep himself or herself updated with the latest features of the platform, and even do some research and provide inputs to development teams on some of the new areas that they can all learn together as a team and explore for future use as part of the releases. Right? Now, it is also essential for the analyst to be a good listener. They should be able to take in inputs from multiple sources. For example, they can hold brainstorming sessions with the team and SMEs to solicit ideas and feedback. Right? A good analyst would be able to apply design thinking principles, evaluate multiple design ideas and then converge on the one that best fits the situation. Right? Now, in terms of a career path for systems analysts, at the entry level, you can get junior folks who have a passion for Salesforce low code and the potential to become a good analyst, right? They can be trained, mentored, and guided by a senior analyst. And over time, the systems analyst can choose to either move into an architect or a consultant role. Now, you don't have to be a hardcore technical person to become an architect, right? And as a consultant, you can specialize in one or more areas such as sales, service, marketing, etc. Now, as far as certifications are concerned, it is recommended to have the admin and the app builder ones, as these cover the foundations of the platform. And as the analysts gain experience on the platform, they can even go for the platform developer one, the consultant ones, and maybe even the designer certifications, if they're pursuing the architect role in future. Now, the platform developer one is a good option to keep for analysts because they will get a peek into how custom development works, okay, and when it is useful. This also makes it easy for them, when they're considering multiple design alternatives and discussing pros and cons with the developers. So to summarize, it is definitely worthwhile investing in a full-time system analyst role within your Salesforce development team. But please make sure they are leveraged to their key strengths. Use their functional expertise to drive low-code solutions over custom code wherever possible. Bring in outcome-oriented thinking into the team. Ensure multiple options are always considered for design and analysis, and you get to choose the best one for each requirement. Now, please try not to burden a system analyst with additional responsibilities, such as writing requirements and user stories. This is usually owned by the business analyst or the product owners. Just because the role has the word analyst, it is not recommended to treat them as a business analyst, right? They have a specific skill set, and you should be able to use them and leverage them for that. Now, do not sideline the system analyst to work on config stories alone. Just because they are experts in low code solutions, don't just put them onto and assign them stories where they can just focus on config only or administrator type of work, right? The analyst should work with the entire team and help with solution design. They can even help validate design options put forward by the developers as well, and then recommend low code options wherever possible. Now, think of the system analyst one of the key approvers to your solution design in each iteration. And trust me, it is much harder to find a good Salesforce system analyst than a Salesforce developer. So if you do find one, make sure you definitely keep them happy and motivated. Now that's all I had, folks, for this session. Please note that these opinions are based on my experience with the Salesforce development team over the years. It doesn't mean that every team out there should change their way of working. But if you do find any of these options useful and feel they will make a difference in the way that your teams work, then please do feel free to try them out. Once again, thank you all for taking time to join me today and listening in patiently. And last but not the least, I would love to thank our wonderful sponsors for making this event happen. Please do reach out to them at our sponsor booths if you would like to know more about their products and services. Okay. Thank you all. We can now take a few questions if you have any, or you can even reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter later. I would be happy to have a chat on this topic.